Call the February 6th Committee of the Whole to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman
Here.
Holfer, Alderwoman Hanneman. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm here.
Skipping all over. Alderwoman Eichman.
Here.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
Here.
Alderman Barber.
Here.
Alderman Nelson.
Here.
And Mayor Olson.
Here. Please rise, join the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before we get started, it's birthday time here at the Common Council, and I understand that Alderman Wilhelm is going to lead the singing of Happy Birthday to Alderman Nelson. We don't need to do that. Happy birthday, John. Thank you. Many more. '29 plus, yeah. Okay, let's move on so that Alderman Nelson can go out and celebrate his birthday. We did the call to order and the roll call, and so we move on to item B, which is the Fire Department Administration providing information on historic, current, and future provisions of fire and EMS services for Franklin. With that, we're going to move to the chief.
Is the right one? Okay, this probably isn't new to anyone. We have brought this up before. We've been talking about this at least since the beginning when Strauss was proposed on the southwest corner of the city, that we know we can't serve that area of the city well from existing fire stations. So we knew at some point we would either need to build a fourth station, or I think you'll see based on the work that we've done that maybe it makes more sense to relocate an existing station. So Franklin Fire Department provides high quality fire response from 3 fire stations. And mainly we are going to be talking about the southern third of the city. Station 1 is at Loomis and Drexel, Station 3 is by the high school, and then Station 2 was built about, I believe it opened in 2001, near the industrial park at a period in time when that industrial park was rapidly expanding. It made sense based on, okay, we have an industrial park, we should probably have a fire station there. We'll get back to that later, but this leaves a big kind of gaping hole on the southwest portion of the city, and our response times from Station 1 it's not going to meet industry standards.
Chief, one other point that we forget to bring up. At the time when we did Station 2, the Ryan Creek Interceptor didn't exist, and there was no ability to serve sewer on the south third and west third of the city. That was another reason why it went where it went.
So current minimum staffing at Station 2 is 2 firefighter paramedics. That does not meet industry national standards or our local standards within Milwaukee County Shared Services. We are not to the point where that station is fully staffed, even with a couple of people that we've added in recent years, and we do still need to add staffing there to get it staffed 24/7. What do you want me to do? So, and although we talked about this for the Strauss project, that was a lot of people's main concern. My main concern has always been the residential aspect that came along with it. Our studies will show that the vast majority of our call volume is driven by residential development. So that residential part still is getting built out, and there's structures in that portion of the city that are not well-served, and people are already living in them. So this did not move forward with Strauss, but this aspect of it did, and we need to, now's a point in time where we need to make a decision about this. So one option is relocation of fire station number 2 to a more strategically placed location and increasing staffing. As I just said, we're still not there yet for 3 stations. We probably shouldn't be talking about a 4th until we're ready to commit to that. NFPA is the National Fire Protection Association. They determine those industry best practices that we are trying to live up to. Standard for the organization and deployment of fire suppression operations, emergency medical operations, and special operations is the relevant standard for career departments. We're going to talk about those first 2, fire operations and EMS. It's just kind of easier to talk about them separately rather than lumping everything kind of together. So the NFPA standard for fire suppression companies is a minimum of 4 personnel situated and deployed throughout the city, so to have a travel time within 240 seconds, 90% of incidents. And I'll come back to that 90% of the time in just a second because it's important. For EMS, an initial arriving EMS company with a defibrillator should be deployed the same way to be able to respond within 4 minutes of travel time. Again, 90% of incidents. These numbers are not just numbers that come out of nowhere. They are based on scientific studies of how long it takes for a fire to spread beyond the incipient phase. I can't talk tonight. So when a fire starts in a trash can, it spreads to a sofa, it spreads to the curtains, and then it spreads to the entire room. These numbers are based on the time it takes for that to happen, where it's not just the contents of a room that are burning, but the actual structural members of the building itself become involved. That's when it gets way more dangerous for us and way harder to put out. So that's what we're trying to meet with our initial responding first due company. Now for EMS, these numbers are based on the time a person, from the time they go into a cardiac arrest, can sustain enough electrical activity in their heart that we can successfully defibrillate them and hopefully resuscitate them. For the most part, it's not talked about, but response times, the fire department always talks about that as that's their key benchmark. For most of our calls, response time doesn't matter. We handle a lot of non-emergency things people could probably better address by making an appointment with their own doctor for even if it's a week from next Tuesday. That's the vast majority of what we do. But for the stuff that is time critical, those cardiac arrests, structure fire, stroke, things like that, it is very critical. So yeah, we don't worry about it on every call. And a lot of our calls, probably over 50%, we respond to without lights and siren, just for safety reasons. Getting back to the 90% number, so if you want to set yourself up for success to meet these requirements, you have to look at where your calls are coming from. What types of occupancies are generating the majority of your responses? And if we can get to, we know where 90% of our incidents are going to be, we can make much better informed decisions about where we should locate our fire stations. That's what this is all about, essentially. So what do we know? Most of our calls are EMS, 80% to 20% non-EMS. I'd lump everything else into non-EMS because it could be car accidents, it could be a grass fire, it could be anything else that's not an EMS call. So of our EMS, 72% of that is generated by residential and only 5% by business and industrial. As far as non-EMS, your alarm sounding, whatever else they may be, again, it's overwhelmingly driven by residential development. Manufacturing, if we want to locate our fire station in the business park, that's a very small part of our actual responses, as it turns out. We didn't, 20 years ago, the fire service in general and our department also, we didn't gather data, we didn't clean the data, we didn't analyze it and use it to make decisions, and that's the change. That's what we've been doing, at least since I've been here. I've worked hard to produce real data and use that to drive decision-making. That last bullet point, I think, is the most important. Location and density of residential development is the biggest predictor of future call volume and location, and should be the primary, Glenn, can you, consideration in determining fire station locations. So this is an analysis of all of our EMS call types by the occupancy type that generates them. From to the left of here, that's all residential of all types. To the right is our other occupancy types, and again, that can be a motor vehicle accident on the road, it could be a business. There's a lot generated by Walmart and Pick and Save and things like that as well. When I just show you residential, you see very clear trend lines here. All of these are increasing. Do you know why mobile home is not increasing? We're not building new ones. We're building new ones of all these other occupancy types, and they're increasing fairly rapidly.
Chief, excuse me 1 second. For those watching, CFS means call for service. EMS means emergency medical service. CBRF down at the bottom means community-based residential facility or assisted living or a group home. It's all the same. Thanks, Chief.
Sorry, we like our
All right.
acronyms.
That's what you pay me for.
So this is all of the non-residential, and you don't see clear patterns here. It's up and down from year to year depending on occupancy type. It's not really driven by growth that's coming in and increases. This spike for mutual aid, that was COVID. We were running a countywide COVID unit out of our Station 2, and that literally ran the wheels off it all the way up to 92nd and Brown Deer Road, and at times even farther than that. So some of these are hard to kind of explain. This is a breakdown of all of our call types over the past 6 years. The bottom line is all of our non-EMS. So again, every type of call that's not an EMS call, and you can see that line stays pretty flat. Where you see increases, this like gray line is residential EMS. Above that is just EMS of all types. And then the top is our yearly totals that sum all those numbers up. This is where we're pushing our numbers upward, and even the non-EMS calls are, like, as I said, overwhelmingly due to residential facilities. That looks like it's round back there. It doesn't look round to me here. This is a summary of all of those non-EMS call types this is for 2022, but this trend holds from year to year that, again, most of our calls are for residential. Storage, warehouse, industrial manufacturing, everything in that industrial park is a small driver of our call volume. This just shows that our non-EMS calls don't have those similar trends. They don't change a lot from year to year. We tend to have about 110 motor vehicle accidents a year. That doesn't wildly fluctuate from year to year. The same is true of actual working structure fires. We probably have, well, it's down this last year, but we probably don't have more than 15 actual working structure fires where we're calling for extra mutual aid companies. This trend right here for 2022, for it being up for non-residential, it's too early to say what to attribute that to. there's a lot of alarm sounding type calls, and a lot of that is tied to, okay, there's construction going on, there's new buildings going in. That tends to generate a higher number of false alarm calls. So that's what I'm gonna say that represents now, but we'll look at what the data tells us in the future. This is our call volume, total calls, not just EMS, by station area. You can see Station 1 is by far our busiest station. Part of that is because we've got Velo Village now, we've got New Perspectives, we're there every day, sometimes several times a day. Station, New Perspectives and Velo. One is CBRF, and we talked about CBRFs, the mayor said what that stands for. Those are people receiving care in more like a group home setting, and those tend to drive our call volume up significantly as well. Station 3 had increased both single family and multifamily. They got Statesman recently and 2 or 3 new subdivisions, the Marquette area. That's why Station 3 is increasing. Station 2, you don't see clear trends, and it kind of lags well behind with response volume. 1, because it's not well situated to cover residential area, and 2, because that growth hasn't come in to this area yet. That's what we're seeing now. That's what's going to drive this. And it's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be, okay, we'll flip the switch and we're going to be running the wheels off. It develops slowly over time. Another reason we want to consider moving Station 2 is to help us offset the call volume at the other stations.
Might not know, 3 is.
I
Yeah.
did that first slide, but yes. The other thing, Chief, is that Station 1 covers generally the southwest part of the city where the new residential is going.
That's correct,
So-
but we can't maintain adequate response times at this point anymore. And I did a survey of all runs to the Irish Cottage over the past several years, and what we found is we're right at that 4-minute edge, just over it actually for most calls, but that's at 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock at night. If this is during the daytime, we're far exceeding that 4 minutes. So if we relocate Station 2, we would handle this area from Station 2, and I think do it far better, as you'll see.
Chief, just so we can continue to be friends, I pointed that out because Station 2 would be the natural assumption as to where the coverage for Southwest would come from. And that's why I pointed out that Station 1 does it
Yeah,
because it's actually.
so part of this is, you'll see that we want to take advantage of travel routes and major thoroughfares. That's why Station 1 responds to that southwest portion now, because Loomis Highway 36 is quicker than responding from the industrial park. The majority of mutual aid was also handled out of Station 1 historically. I think we're seeing a lot more go east out of Station 3 also at this point.
On this chart, I'm sorry, I'm being me. On this chart, is the mutual aid numbers included in the station that they went from?
No, it's just out of the city.
Okay.
So another thing this relocation will let us do is assign all of current Station 1 southern third to Station 2, because they'd be able to more effectively handle that from that location. And I'll show you those slides in just a minute. That will almost, not quite, one will still be a little bit busier, but it will almost balance out call volume across the 3 stations. And that's kind of a morale thing for our people. When you're at one station and you're getting hammered all day long and you don't get lunch till 4 o'clock and you don't sleep at all, when Station 2's kind of hanging out and relaxing. So this will help
That's
our
after 4
morale
o'clock.
after 4 o'clock. Yeah, this will help our morale, and it'll help us better handle all calls on a citywide basis. So this is specifically talking about that southwest corner of the city and our challenges that we're facing there. There is significant current and future residential development. As I said, a lot of this is already there. It didn't wait for Strauss or whatever is going to go in that location. It's there now. It's not well served by our existing stations, as we explained. The difference here is that mutual aid does not help us down there. There's nobody to the south or west that's going to come in. Mutual aid is kind of like bullseye, the center of the incident, and then people come in, fill in from further around. Station 3 by the high school, we can get Oak Creek very quickly. We can get Milwaukee Engine 14 very quickly, and a lot of other resources can kind of converge on there. That southwest corner, it's pretty vacant, and if they are there and they're working a structure fire, they're going to be alone for a long time. That's just, we want to get that first due unit there, but it also takes time to get an effective response force. There's multiple things that have to happen all at once. We have to search for victims. We have to ventilate. We have to set up an incident command. So we need more than just our one unit showing up when it's a real incident that we're working on. The industrial development hasn't quite happened yet, but I think it's still planned for parts of this area. So it's still a consideration. And the last thing is most of what's going in there is single-family residential homes. Why are we worried about that? So generally, even like a senior housing or CBRF, they have sprinkler systems, they have alarm systems. We get alerted early and the sprinkler system keeps it in check. Most apartment fires are confined to that initial unit because there's firewalls in between them and various things like that. Single-family residents are not protected by sprinkler and alarm systems. A lot will have fire alarms or smoke detectors, but it's generally not usually calling out to us to give us early notification. Newer houses tend to be open concept and they use lightweight construction materials. These are engineered structural members, or basically like a fiber board or almost like a particle board laminated together. And these tend to burn very quickly and fail very quickly in a fire. That's why having all these big new houses with open concept, but very not built the way things were 40 years ago, is a concern for us. And also they're furnished with greater quantities of synthetic materials and finishes. These can light off very quickly. It adds to a more toxic environment more quickly in a fire incident. I've heard a comparison between, what are they called? The mattress? Memory foam mattresses compared to a 5-gallon bucket of kerosene. There's just so much energy released from there when things like that start to light up. Well, so what are our options? And we talked initially, the plan was, okay, we'll probably have to build a 4th station at some point. Again, we want to take advantage of the best road. So it would probably, whether we build it as a 4th station or staff it as a 3rd station, it's probably going to be right in this area. If we go further west on Ryan Road, it becomes very narrow and not really suitable for this. And we don't want to lose that contact with that north-south corridor of 76th Street. And you can see we can get to the north and even northwest on major streets probably quite quickly. Current Station 2 location, you're 2 minutes to get to Ryan Road, and that's before you can't keep going north. You have to turn east or west. There's no good way out of there, and it just doesn't help us support our other calls, or other fire stations, rather. So the 4-station model, obviously it creates a larger department. A larger department is inherently more adaptable, effective, and capable. It creates kind of synergy that you have more people that can work together and you have more units freeing up as new calls come in. Bigger is just, it would be a better department. The disadvantage is it's very expensive. It's an additional 2.2 to 2.5 million annually in only personnel costs. And that was calculated very conservatively by just hourly on-duty staffing of 4 additional people per day. I didn't do the calculation because that's where it gets a lot muddier, is how many people does it take to get that 4 per day when you have people on vacation, when you have people on FMLA, when you have people off for other reasons. So I feel that number is very conservative, but also keep in mind that increases by 2.5% per year, 3% per year, compounding every year. It's not long before we're at 3 million and even above that. There's also additional capital costs for apparatus.
Excuse me. Explain that last sentence in the first disadvantage point. An additional 16 to 18 new firefighters.
So, yeah, we're not, to get an increase of 4 per day, we're probably looking at hiring 16 to 18 people, knowing that we're not where we need to be yet at Station 2. So this isn't just talking about Station 4. We still have catch up to play with Station 2. So we're probably.
That was a loaded question. So I'll answer it the way I would have answered, a layman would. If you want to hire one firefighter that covers 3 different shifts, which is how we run, that's 3 firefighters to get 1 position. If you need 4, that's obviously 12. Then what do you do with vacation, sick time, and that kind of thing? So that's where that comes from.
We work, for those of you who might not know, we work 24-hour shifts on a 3-shift rotating basis. So to get up by a net of 4 per day, you need to hire 12 plus some leeway in there for people that might be off. So we're talking 15 at least. So also the capital costs of running a 4th station, it's another piece of apparatus which are going through the roof, both engines and ambulances at this point, and I don't see that the brakes going on that anytime soon. And it's also a 25% increase in just our annual operating and supply costs. So there are some questions and uncertainties. If we decide we want to build this as a 4th station and maybe build it further west than what we had showed as our preferred location, are we going to be able to find real estate at a reasonable cost? Unfortunately, there's a lot of fire stations in this country that are built where they're built because the land was cheap. It doesn't mean they're in great places to effectively serve the community. It's just decisions were made based on budget bottom lines. So if you tell me, yeah, let's go ahead and do this 4th station and staff it, I don't think I can find the people right now. There's no applicants. People used to line up to work these jobs. We were all on lists and took tests with 200 other people. People are not taking these jobs right now. I have 1 applicant and he's applied at multiple departments. So it would be tough to commit to staffing a 4th station at this point in what the labor market looks like. And if we committed to staffing a 4th station, station number 1 is still our busiest station, and it's still going to have the most rapidly increasing call volume due to all the development that's coming in. There's a point where we need to add bodies to Station 1 also. If we've committed all our resources to staffing that 4th station, that's not going to be busy right away. Does that take away our ability to respond effectively when we need people elsewhere? And there's a pretty strong argument that it would have some impact. So option 2 is relocate Station 2, the building and staffing to more advantageous location and allow us to remain a 3-station response model probably 40 years into the future, if not further than that. Our goal was to build the station big enough that it is a plan for the future. I'll say it again on a later slide, but we know where the best access roads are from now through 50 years from now. So that's what we need to take advantage of. And again, I'll make the point again that our staffing at current Station 2 is not where it needs to be, but it's a lot closer if we can add a couple bodies at Station 2, move them to a better location, and help from that location to respond to other areas of the city. I had 5 to 7. I think we're in that 7 to 8 million based on other projects that are ongoing at this time. The land we are considering is, again, the DPW site. So advantages of the 3-station model, again, it comes down to cost. We're not paying 2.5 million in personnel costs to staff a station that's, as I said, probably not going to get super busy super fast. And we worked very closely with the GIS department and very intensively. Thanks to Todd Niedermeyer, especially for all his work he's put into this. But this maximizes the number of residential properties that can be accessed within 4 minutes. And we will show you that, and it's pretty dramatic what that map looks like. Again, we're trying to hit where can we put a fire station that effectively gets us closer to that 90% of the time for our response time benchmarks required by the national standards. So disadvantage, if there is any, is it doesn't give us more. It doesn't improve us. Well, I mean, it would improve our responses to other areas of the city, but it doesn't get us something more than that. There could be marginally slower response time to the southeast corner. It's important to recognize that the maps we're going to show, these are real travel time maps without lights and siren, without traffic preemption, and with current traffic control signals and things in place. We can override some of that. We do have preemption. We can exceed the speed limit if we know we're going to something super critical. As I said before, most of our responses don't warrant us going much faster than the posted speed limit. And we do expect this southeast corner of the city where you'll see that it might be a little slower. We expect that to be mostly commercial, industrial, and that's where Saputo and some of these other companies are going. These are the most modern, fire resistive, kind of best protected occupancies that we have in the city. So, and we don't go running into fires in industrial occupancies. We get an effective force there. We do reconnaissance. We meet with property owners. We find out which areas the alarms are going off, which sprinklers might be going off, and then we approach it from there. If there's a kid in a second-story crib in a single-family house, we're going through the door when second we get on the scene. There's a big difference. So these, and I will make these available to everyone. You kind of have to stare at these to really see the subtle differences. We will make this PowerPoint available on the city website. I'm not looking for action on this. We're looking to get this out there and let you guys start talking about it and talking to your constituents about it, because we want to be transparent about what we're doing and why we think this is a good idea.
Turn your mic on. Hold on. Sorry, wrong one.
So,
Alderman Willow.
How much of the city goes beyond off the map there that's still left?
not much. We're right at, yeah, we're right close there. We shrunk it, we cropped it down to not show further north, but we really wanted to focus on that whole southern third of the city primarily. So east to west and at least to the south, you're seeing pretty much the full.
Because the landfill's still over at least a couple more blocks, or those sections, quarter sections,
Landfill is in this section right here.
right there? Okay.
Yep, this is Oakwood
Oh, yeah, I see.
and this is
Okay,
112.
right, thanks.
These are actually the new streets that went in by Strauss. So they do show up on these, but they don't, they're not in for us to do the calculations on travel times yet. So this is 4, 5, and 6-minute response times. So as I said, we have traffic preemption. We can exceed the speed limit if we need to. So our 4 minutes is really probably better indicated by this 5-minute marker. And you can see that the vast majority of our city would be well within that. And these residential areas, as they develop and as streets go in here, these will all turn darker red or pink. The response times, without showing the streets, they can't show what that looks like. So this is our proposed location. Again, we are not really losing any time traveling east from here, from the current station too. We know the schools are going to are planning for this residential development here. They've already purchased this property. There's things up. These houses, a lot of these are already up. These are going to start soon. This is just west of 116th on Ryan Road. And then these are in between, like the Thorncrest, Briarwood. That's all coming in very soon too. So as those are built out and roads go in there, these will all turn darker red. I think this is probably the most effective slide possibly that we have. Where's my mouse? You can see all the residential development that's already existing that we can access much more quickly by relocating the station. And you can see we're not really losing any travel time to the east. Most of that 600 plus calls in Station 2's area are generated by two specific addresses. One is the CBRF and the other is the House of Correction. Both are effectively, or even more effectively, served by this response model. And again, you kind of got to stare at this to get all the subtle nuances, but again, this will all turn to the dark crosshatch as roads come in here. So we talked about how we could locate a station so as to hit that 90% of call volume number. By moving this station to where we are proposing, we are increasing the number of residential development only within that 4-minute response time by over 300%. This is another slide that clearly illustrates that. Again, this is residential only and existing residential. A lot of this new stuff that's you're seeing at 112th and Ryan Road, this data is from 2001. That's not shown on here. It's not showing any of these new residents that's coming in. This number is going to be far, far higher than this. So as they say in real estate, location, location, location. We know where these best roads are going to be. We don't know where any particular development is going to be or where a CBRF is going to be, but we know where the best place to respond to cover the area is going to be based on the travel times. The state's not going to build another Ryan Road a mile to the south. County's not going to move Highway U, 76th Street. These will be here for 50 years, and these will still be the best access roads for us to take. And again, part of this, we need to staff the station appropriately, and to make that point, beat it over the head again, we're not there yet. We're still going to be asking for people. We do have a plan to ask council permission to apply for a SAFER grant. What a SAFER does is it pays the entire costs of employees for the entire first 4 years. It used to be that you paid into it at a higher, like you pay 25% the second year and 50% the third year, which you still have to plan for because you have to plan to be at that level to fully staff when that comes off. But that lets you plan for that staffing and stay under that shared revenue requirements.
Alderman Henneman.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you very much, Chief. Very informative. Appreciate your being here and all the hard work you're putting into this. Can you shed a little bit of light on whether or not you can rely on assistance from, say, Test Corners or Vernon to come into the southwest corner of the city? Is there like a hard, like, stop between the counties in terms of what you can do in shared?
There's not a wall, but I can tell you they are having very difficult times finding paid on call and volunteers. Many of them are having to change their staffing models. We can't get people to do it right now for 80 grand a year. They certainly can't get anybody to do it for paid on call or, so that's the main difference. But there's also in Milwaukee County, we're part of shared services. We all train to the same requirements. We all operate off the same protocols. And it's just, we're bringing something else into that could be, what am I trying to say politely?
One additional element with the paid on call departments. Paid on call departments to the south, which would be the town of Raymond and Wind Lake, and the west, which would be Test Corners, Muskego. Their firefighters are not at the station 24 hours a day. So when they have a response, they're paged out, from their homes or places of work. They have to go to the station, pick up their equipment, and then respond out to the scene. So we can still use them. For instance, those departments have water tenders for the areas of our community that don't have fire hydrants. So we do utilize them for that. But for our day-to-day mutual aid, because we have the same communication system, our computer-aided dispatch systems are linked together, we generally rely on the Milwaukee County agencies as primary, just because there's such a long time lag for the paid-on-call departments to be able to respond.
That's an excellent question. Just a little bit more information. Muskego's looking for additional firefighters. They can't find them. Town of Raymond met with the chiefs and I 6 months ago, trying to get EMS service to Karen and her family in Raymond, and they can't find EMS people, and it's just terrible. So coming north, just not an option, really. They're good people. They train well, but it's just not reality.
And generally, when we rely on those other communities outside Milwaukee County, it's not for EMS. And we're driven 80% by EMS. So we rely on our shared services throughout Milwaukee County to respond to that corner of the city.
Chief, couple questions and points of interest here. So who basically completed this study for the best placement and future needs assessment?
We did in cooperation with our GIS department.
So you did it internally?
Yeah.
You didn't have an outside agency do it or anyone else? You did it internally?
No, people suggested, why don't you hire somebody to do a study? And I'm like, who knows our calls better than we do? Who knows our city better than we do?
That's arguable, but I understand what we do and what we know.
We can pay $200,000 to have somebody do it and come to
That's a great deal.
the same conclusion. I'm fairly certain.
Okay. I guess one of the things I looked at is with Station 1, saying, looking at Station 1 is the best location, it's the busiest house, hop on Loomis kind of takes you around. Has there been any looking at into basically maybe keeping Station 1 there, doubling its size and the footprint there, and looking at that as kind of a home base, training, everything as the big house?
So we're at that edge of being able to meet that 4-minute response time currently. The more that goes in here, the more traffic, we're gonna be hard pressed to keep meeting that. As I said, we don't meet it during daytime hours, so I don't know that that's gonna be the best to cover that area. But you bring up some good points. Station 1 is getting busier faster than any other station, and there's gonna be a point where we need to add another, maybe it's a 2-person ambulance crew, med unit. So committing to 4, I think, makes it very much harder for us to increase staffing at Station 1, if that makes sense. Station One, location-wise, it's pretty good. It's probably our best positioned station at this point. Station 3 is not terrible. I would like to have seen that gone closer right at 51st and Drexel if we wanted to stay on Drexel or move even north toward Rawson. Station 2, I'm looking at the best access roads to go every direction for a new Station 2 if we were to relocate it. And I think it makes sense to add administrative space if we build a new station, because we're going to need to add personnel space at Station 1. That's,
And I guess that's what my point was looking at Station One as far as an expansion and making that basically the hub, because the call volume's not gonna go down.
right.
We also have a large, I understand you keep using the S word for the southwest area, but we also have a large amount of building going on around Station One.
Right.
And so I guess mine, just thinking out loud, is what a great place if you had to put a new firehouse or double the size of your current one, because you're always gonna need that response time. I'm not a fan of the fourth house.
Right. I
think it's a
agree
fiscal
100%.
nightmare.
I agree.
You can't have, the staffing is a reality that we're not gonna be able to do that. And even if we were able to hire, like back in the days when we got hired on these jobs, when we had hundreds of people applying for them, those days are gone. So now where are you gonna fill the people with? So that's why I guess I wanted to look a little more into that Station One expansion, current footprint, even in that park area, however it could be done. You know, I know that would be a much, much less money than building a new area in the southwest.
It also doesn't get us where we need to be as far as where the new development is coming in. We've already are kind of exceeding those response times benchmarks that we'd like to see. We need something in that southwest corner. And if we can kind of optimize its location where it can still go east and can still travel north, we need something there regardless of what we do with Station 1.
Thank you.
Just for information, there was a study a few decades ago, probably 23 years ago, I'm saying, to do just what you're suggesting on Station 1. So there is a study somewhere that's way out of date,
So-
but there is one.
Station 1, when we were talking years ago with our other partner agencies, at the time there was a plan to move Greendale Station further southwest on Loomis, and that would let us to move Station 1 down to like the Crossroads area. But Greendale didn't follow through with their part of that plan, and that wouldn't allow us to relocate that Station 1 to a more advantageous area. The other issue, like we've brought up, is Station 1 is well served by our mutual aid partners. Greendale in particular is in our city 150 times a year, just taking our basic EMS calls. But as I said, we're still, the southwest is the area, if you look at that map, that still needs attention. And building this would let us free up space to do some of the things that you're talking about at Station 1. We're going to have to add another crew there just due to everything that's going on in that area. And a lot of that is residential as well. The new going in on the Mar Farm property and the stuff that's being proposed for 76 and Rawson, it's going to.
Well, I sort of like the idea of looking again at Station 1, but when I look at the map and I look at, you know, what you're going to be giving up going to the east a little bit, and there's some pretty big substantial developments going on 27th, so I don't know how many units that facility that's going
the
out.
seasons,
Yeah.
if you look back, so we can get to 27th and Ryan just because this is right on Ryan Road and we can instantly drive at faster speeds. And we have traffic preemption for all of the traffic control lights in these areas. The Seasons is right about here, so we'll be right at that
Right.
4-minute even without lights and siren for that one. Now, as we talked about what's going in to the south of Oakwood, that's much better protected. And even the seasons is sprinklered. There's alarm systems, so yeah.
But I was just, my point I was going to get at was, even though I know you feel like you can still serve it from the new station there, I think what's going to happen is it's going to put that station there, and then we're still going to need another one in the future further south. So,
I
I'm
would
wondering
say
if, I don't know how long out that would be, but would it be better to look at Station 1 and then get the time to get the employees and stuff, and then put a new one out further, even further out, up in the, that corner? So, just like on the north side of, where the Monarch Drive and that is, or just south of the Monarch Drive, somewhere in that area. I just think we're eventually, with all the development out there, that's where it's going to go. You might need another one anyway. So
I can
let's hope not, but I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I think we should be talking to other partner agencies, like maybe we share space on 27th Street with Oak Creek. But I think this gets us through the next 30 years before we get to a point where we have to do something. The other point is, what do we do with the existing Station 2 building? Well, it's kind of,
Well, that's why I was saying is that if one could be developed to hold you out till you could get the other one further where you need it and still keep two, you'd keep them all, but that's
Chief, go back one slide, please. If you focus on Station 1, you're still not covering the southwest. As simple, right there. So in the future, we need to do something to Station 1, absolutely.
yes.
But let's not kid ourselves. Where are we going to come up with the money for 16 or 18 firefighters? It's not going to happen.
well, that was my point.
Well,
yes.
which is why you don't put a lot of money into Station 1, because you need to cover the southwest portion of the city. That's why the chief and his professional staff are suggesting a new station at 84th and Ryan. The other point I want to make is, we're talking about residential development being the prime user of their services, which it is. You look at the southwest part of the city, west of Monarch Drive, it's going to be industrial. Well, maybe not. There might be an apartment development down there, but that'll be right off of Loomis Road. There's not going to be residential west of 112th Street, probably, because of the amount of wetlands and things there. The section between 112th and 76th Street, a lot of that's owned by the school. Well, that may have a lot of residential on it, but that's going to be a while. But that will be able to be covered from a new station relatively quickly. South of that is waste management and wetlands. So I think what we're looking at is between 112th and 76th Street for future residential planning. Oh, still your turn, Alderman.
I was done when you took the floor, so I'm good.
So I understand with the response time, I don't think expanding Station 1 is going to be the best option at all. However, if we were to move Station 2 then, has there been any thoughts or ideas on what we would do then with that vacant station?
We haven't fully explored that. It could be possibly sold. It could be used for other city storage. This project's going to impact the DPW, so maybe short-term it makes sense to keep it in our hands. I'm sure every city department has a trailer or a vehicle that they wouldn't mind getting maybe off their immediate lot into an alternate location. I guess it hasn't fully been considered.
Thank you.
Just wanted to thank you and your staff for the focus on the data. I'm a data-driven person,
Yeah,
so for me, that
am
helps
too.
a lot. And it's nice because you're on top of being able to predict the trends and see what's happening. In earlier discussions, I seem to recall some question regarding stop and go lights and other access for what we are doing. Have we gotten any further information on that at all, Glenn? Like if the city, with the city garage we were talking about, you know, is the fire department going to be able to activate a stop and go light there, being so close to 76th?
So, so we have talked to WisDOT about, you know, when they redo their intersection, and that is a possibility. We could have EVP there at 76 and Ryan Road, emergency vehicle preemption is what it's called. Because we haven't really proceeded very far in the design, the flashing lights when they want to leave the station, right in front of the station, looks like we'll probably have to include that whenever we do our project. They'll be less accommodating with the DOT project. We did have a discussion on maybe, in conjunction with a future school and DPW, could we warrant a light basically at 81st Street where Zurin intersection, if you will. And the conversation is that probably doesn't warrant it. School's probably too far out in the future to really think about that right now.
Thank you.
And we wouldn't want to have the fire department drive a frontage road to head west to get to a light to go back east. That wouldn't make, we're going to do it. Let's do it the way we should. Anybody? Alderman Hanneman?
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate your wanting to put this out on the internet, make this available for people to really look at and study and get used to the idea. But where do you see, Mayor, Chief, next steps with this? How long until what's your timeline till we really start looking at this? Obviously, we're going to have to start planning for how would we pay for it? You know, financing and that sort of thing.
There
You know,
is,
we've looked at it in the future CIP plans, but rather than talking about it, where do we start taking some action?
so there is some money in the 2023 budget dedicated to this. There's 355 for design and engineering. And there is some money for you guys, Glenn, to do site prep and things like that. I don't think we want to let it sit too long. I think maybe like 60 days to kind of let people absorb this and ask questions. We will make this available to everyone. We do have our contact info on here, and people can talk to us, they can talk to you, and I would see us putting it on a maybe April agenda to at least bring it back up to decide what further steps we need to take, or if there's no, if there's no action, there's still development ongoing in places that worries me. And I got my sense of worry is kind of above and beyond that I got from my Bohemian grandmother. People think Bohemians don't worry about anything, the grandmothers do. So it worries me to have all of these single-family houses in the middle of what were just recently agricultural fields. We see pretty frequently lightning as a cause of fires in developments like this, and it keeps me up at night.
For the record, we do have $355,000 budgeted for design for the fire station, because the fire station is going to occupy space where there's currently buildings for the Department of Public Works. All of us included 2.9 and change for a cold storage building, both the design and construction. So the timing is such that whenever the council chooses to make a decision, the departments can move ahead. We'll have the bigger question of where do we come up with $9 million, but that's for the council to decide on bonding. And so you guys tell me. So Alderman Hanneman, you finished?
I'm finished, yes.
Alderman Barth.
I appreciate your analysis. I think it's on target and to my way of thinking rather than expedience I think we have to look at what the overall effect on our community is, and to me, that's the response time. Bottom line is how quickly can we get to service people I think that has to be our primary concern, and that would be my choice of when it comes to making decisions as to how we do that. To me, it's our citizens, they deserve that.
I agree 100%. And as emergency manager, as fire chief, but also as a Franklin resident and taxpayer, this kind of picks kind of everything. It's a compromise, yes, but it's the best compromise I think we could come up with.
Anybody else? Thank you, Chief, Chief, and Chief. For those watching, we have three chiefs here. We have the chief. Jim Mayer is our chief, our assistant chief for operations. He's our firefighter. Next to him is the best paramedic in the world. I'm channeling my predecessor. Shannon Antoine is responsible for emergency medical services. So that's why there's 3 gold shields sitting in front of you. So thank you, guys and lady.
Thank you.
Regulo and Marion? Next item is a status update on the rewrite of the Unified Development Ordinance. Mr. Martinez and Ms. X. Whenever you're ready. For the record, Alderman Nelson's left the seat at 7:35.
Okay. Good evening, Committee of the Whole, Regulo Martinez, Principal Planner, and Marian X, Associate Planner. This is an item for the status update about the Unified Development Ordinance rewrite project that started in 2021. The last update was in November last year, and the Common Council moved to have this update on the Committee of the Whole this month. So that's where we are now, is in the draft UDO section, basically writing all the articles of the new development ordinance. So we are here. We're having a workshop with the Plan Commission this month, and then we'll need to hold 2 additional workshops, and then we will complete the step 4, that is the draft for the entire ordinance. So here we are in step 4. We have completed all the project kickoff, all the public engagement, and the UDO diagnosis report. This is the proposed structure of the new ordinance with 12 articles. Articles from 1 to 6, we have the draft articles that are included in the packet. And these articles has been reviewed by the task force, that is basically the Plan Commission, with 2 members of the Environmental Commission and 1 member of the Economic Development Commission. Now we're currently working in Articles 8 and 9, the subdivision standards and administrative standards. These 2 articles has not been reviewed by the task force. That's scheduled for this month.
Actually, Thursday night.
Correct. And then we will have a second session by the end of February. And the consultant is still working on the natural resource protection standards and the plan development districts, nonconformities, and definitions. So the next workshop for these 3 articles, it's tentatively scheduled by the end of March. And the other workshop for the natural resource, it's tentatively for May. That's the schedule of the rewrite. I just want to make some corrections on the cover sheet that is included in the packet. So for the step 5, that is the draft and final UDO, it says that is anticipated for the first semester of 2023. We had a meeting with the consultant today. That will be extended by the end of summer, tentatively.
So your definition of semester is a quarter.
Or 6 months.
Okay.
Right. So, and then in the cover sheet, there is like some highlights of the major changes with respect to the current UDO. This is a all-inclusive list. It's just a selection of some topics. So basically, it's the consolidation of the zoning districts. The intent is that the current UDOs is redundant in some cases and cumbersome. It has like about 38 zoning districts. Some districts are pretty similar to each other. So the intent is to consolidate into 21 zoning districts. That's a correction. A good point, Alderman Barber. Actually, 21. Just to streamline the review process and to make the ordinance more user-friendly. The other major change is the use table. The current UDO use the standard industrial classification table. It's a table that has like about 37 pages. It's complicated to understand in some cases. The change here is to use broader use categories, like for example, retail instead of the multiples classification of retail places that has the SIC table. For residential districts, the new ordinance is proposing to eliminate the density standards. The current UDO has some density standards in dwelling units per acre. The intent is to eliminate that standard and to regulate the density only by the lot size. So for districts that are more dense, then logically the smaller lot sizes will render into a higher density.
Regular, before you go on,
Yep.
I kind of apologize for interrupting, but
Sure.
I think it makes more sense, though, if we talked about replacing 38 zoning districts with 22, but we don't mention that in changing those number of zoning districts, we also reduce the number of non-conforming uses across the city. And
That's correct.
Important.
Yeah.
That's important to note because the zoning code is going to be something that will be a little bit controversial and misunderstood. And I think it's important that people understand that we're trying to make life better, not get in their business, and this will help.
Yeah, good point. The consultant in the diagnosis part prepared a nonconformity analysis for each of the zoning districts, and the intent with the consolidation was to reduce the nonconformities. Yeah, that's a good point.
It'd be helpful in the future to note the number of nonconformings that are going to be reduced by the change. And we have that number, it was in the.
We have that in the diagnosis report, correct. Yeah. Okay. We'll continue with the next item is the minimum living area standards. The current UDO has this standard, like a minimum living area for dwelling units, approximately like 1,100 square feet, approximately, varies depending on the zoning district. The intent is to remove this standard. And this will allow for, we'll say, a broader range of housing types. That's why the new UDO has, for example, a standard for townhouses, duplexes, that this new UDO has some specific standards that apply to these housing types. A new topic that is included in this draft is the accessory dwelling units that are not allowed in the current UDO. So with this new UDO, that will be permitted in residential districts. The accessory dwelling units like a granny flat or garage apartment, that you need to have a
Granny
principal unit.
flat. Be careful, there's some oldsters up here,
Oh,
like
sorry.
me. It's a mother-in-law's suite.
Mother-in-law.
I just, or that.
Some new standards are not included in the current UDO because there are some like new topics. It's like food trucks, outdoor dining, short-term rentals, solar energy collection systems, and the townhomes and multifamily buildings that I mentioned before. Another change is that the minimum parking requirement is replaced with maximum parking ratios because yeah, our current minimum standards are maybe so high that in some cases you can see these vast parking lots that are mostly unused for most of the day. Okay, the sign standards are moved from the municipal code into the new Unified Development Ordinance. It has a lot of graphics and tables that you can see in the draft articles. The current municipal code for signs has few or none graphics. So this is an important change. Another new standard is the connectivity index. This is to promote more like a street, a grid street pattern instead of and discourage cul-de-sacs. So basically, with the connectivity index, it will have a ratio between the links and nodes. So links is a typical street, and the nodes is an intersection. So it will require more intersections than links. So in that way, it will promote a grid street pattern and discourage cul-de-sacs. That's the intent of the connectivity index. Mm-hmm.
So regular, the current ordinance is a 800-foot length cul-de-sac, and we seem to often go beyond that. So this one's suggesting 300 feet. What is going to happen when someone wants to go beyond the 300? What's the process for variance on that? We can't even keep them at 800 most of the time because people just want to have really long cul-de-sacs.
Yeah, so the intent is to reduce the quantity of cul-de-sacs in the subdivision with the connectivity index, and also to reduce the length of the cul-de-sacs, as you mentioned. And your question, the answer is the subdivider will need to apply for variance.
Okay, and I guess there's a lot to get into on that later, but it looks like, well, when I'll have some questions here, and I'll go back to the variance when, I'll let you keep going, and then I have some questions on the variance problem. Thanks.
Okay. And the final items, the streamlined review process, for example, the zoning administrator with the new UDO will have authority to approve site plans that are like for small developments lower than 100,000 square feet in area. So because currently every site plan has to go to the plan commission, and that makes the review process longer. So the intent is to streamline the process, go to the administrative review for small site plans, and reduce the waiting time for applicants. This is a few selection of some items. It's not all inclusive, as I mentioned, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, I have a series of them. I want to start off with page 8, and I want to note that the current UDO has a section for the authority section under the state statutes, wherein the authority is vested in the Plan Commission and the Common Council under basically section 62 and 66, et cetera, of the state statutes. And I thought that was really an important section to reinstate, because in those sections, it includes review of site plans. And under the intent, which is on the same page, and it's down on item F, the current one had encouraged the compatibility between different land uses and protect existing development from encroachment. The existing development came out, and now it just says, and protect from the encroachment. There's no word of what we're protecting there. So it seems like development or existing development should be put into that sentence.
I'm sorry, you said page H, but which article?
It's under intent. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the council packet numbers, because it's easier for me to zoom that way.
On the bottom right is on the packet. But on the UDO that you're looking at, it's page
one of three.
1. It's actually the back page of the table of contents. It's the first page.
Oh, I see. I found it.
And the Alderwoman is referring to item F
Okay.
of 15-103.
So the first one is referring to that same page where the authorization was taken out. The authority section was removed. And that was something I thought was important. Then right underneath F is G, where it talks about the further the wise use of conservation, natural resource, soils, topography. Steep slopes was removed, and we don't have a lot of steep slopes, and I've always said that if we don't retain some of those, it's like the F in Franklin, it's going to stand for flat and featureless. So I would think that the steep slopes is still a pretty good consideration to leave in there. And then there would be a comma missing between the water, right before the water wording. Some of the things that I really appreciated in the previous ordinance that were removed was preserve and protect the beauty of the city of Franklin. That was removed. Also prevent and erosion control, sedimentation, and other pollution of the surface and subsurface waters. Also removed. Discourage development in floodplains if there is any practical alternative. That was removed. Then the other sections, the entire compliance section in the previous UDO was removed, and under the compliance section, it removed the sections of compliance with the WDNR, the Army Corps, American Disabilities Acts, DOT, soil avoidance, elevation above floodplains. To me, those are major things in planning that I don't know if they're going to be covered in another section, but I'm hoping that if they're not put back under the compliance section, that they are covered in a future section. On page 14, which I'll have to give a different page for that, that would be Article 2, page 4 of 5. And that is the official zoning map. Where it says it's hereby made part of this ordinance, typically the zoning map is to match the master plan, or then you have this rezoning and public hearings, and that's where we get our public input. We have a map in the very back of this section that shows the zoning map. It looks to me like we might be moving toward adopting this code with this zoning map as a one-time zoning map, just adopted, and then it would be, that would be the zoning, the rezone map. Currently, each parcel comes in, has to have a rezone, and that allows for a public notice. It removes, if we're going to do, I don't know if we're planning on doing that, but if we're going to take one one zoning map that we have now and make all of these zoning changes all at once, it's going to remove a lot of the public input process, and I'm not sure the residents would be in favor of that. And then also what was removed with the zoning districts, each had decibel levels, industrial parks versus recreational parks. So I don't know what the intent is for covering sound levels. If we're going to do strictly the municipal code. But before removing that and going strictly with the municipal code, I think we should take a look at which one we would prefer. Every district had do you need to give some feedback to me while I'm making these comments? Because you look like you would like.
Sure, yeah.
I'm open to that, absolutely.
So with regards to the zoning map, the one that is in the packet is not final because we haven't included the comments from the task force. So I didn't mention that in the presentation. With regards to the...
And we've not come to a procedure yet on how best to do the rezoning that will be necessary. It's not been discussed yet.
Correct. With regards to the public input, then we have the public engagement part that was completed. And in the next step, step 5, there is a public open house, and there will be an workshop with elected officials too.
I think I was referring to the zoning map itself. So for example, up in where I've had a lot of concerns, there's a property that's zoned institutional. And if we were to change that zoning, right now it looks like it's still going to say that, but let's just say that this map was going to change that into residential, and we adopted this complete map, then each individual parcel is not going to have an individual public hearing as the way it would.
To address some of this, the intent is not to conduct a citywide rezoning. What we're actually altering is the text of the ordinance. So no, we're not going parcel by parcel to say this lot is a new zoning category. We're essentially rewriting the underlying code. So the standards for the sites are not going to change. We're not going to be making an industrial site something different through this process, but we may be saying the setbacks are a little bit different based on some of the standards that are happening here, that kind of thing, and consolidating some of the text. So there are many, especially in the residential categories, many sites that the zoning categories are broadly similar, and so they might have a new name of both being, R3 and R3E become one thing, but we will not be changing the actual zoning.
So if it's zoned R, it'll be zoned R, just could be a different code of R, but it'll still be the same.
We're changing the
The
text.
UC won't change.
Exactly.
That's really helpful. I do have a couple corrections. I can give these to you later on some properties that aren't quite labeled right.
Yep, thank you.
And then, let's see, where was I at? Oh, and the sound issue was one that I was talking about, taking a lot of the sound issues and the decibels out of these codes and then just going to the municipal code. I'd really like to see some review on that. On page,
Yes, that was discussed in the task force that we had in November. That was one of the questions. So currently, the noise standard are regulated both in the UDO and the municipal code. And the recommendation of the diagnostic part was to eliminate the noise standards of the UDO and keep the noise standards of the municipal code.
Okay.
Because the standards of the UDO are enforced by like planning department, and the standards in the municipal code are enforced by police department.
right, and I wasn't really sure how much of, I understand sort of you almost have to have the police to go out for noises, but I'm thinking setting the standards during the planning process isn't really going to be covered by the police going out and dealing with noises, but setting the standards in those zoning districts and stuff used to be in the ordinance, and now how do you set those standards when you're planning something? So you're going to be planning the school's going to be putting up a big outdoor field thing and speakers, and so that's what I'm referring to.
Right, good point. Actually, in the use table, outdoor places of assembly, like when you mentioned like drive-in theater, for example, those are conditional use in all districts. So whenever we receive a proposal for that, that will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis with all the special review, the conditional use review process that will go to the common
And the
council.
standards of the decibels set for those will be found in what procedure or level or chart or?
Well, the current noise standards in the municipal code says like any activity that generate a noise between 70 and 79 decibels, that requires a permit. That's what and that applies to the entire city, regardless of the zoning district.
Right. Well, because this wasn't really about the Muni code on that, I didn't brush up on that, so I will make sure that I do that before we.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one was on page 30, where it says permitted uses, and that would
Hold
be
on.
page
Hold on.
15
Yeah, thank you.
of 34 in Article 3. So it says permitted uses, non-structural industrial and commercial uses, and then permitted uses, golf courses, tennis courts. Now, keep in mind, this is in floodway district. So we're saying tennis courts, and which are some of the things that are really expensive if the surface areas get wet. And then golf courses, which are some of the most chemically laden, are actually listed in here as permitted uses when they used to be a special use. Same thing as portable latrines in floodways, used to be a special use. Sanitary sewer and water lines also listed as prohibited on page 32. So that one's actually listed as a permitted use, and then when you go over to page 32, it appears to be listed also under prohibited uses on H as a prohibited use. So it's kind of categorized both. So you might want to
Right.
find a category for that one.
Yeah, the standards for all the floodplain districts are updated to be consistent with a new model ordinance for the state that was adopted in 2021. That is in the diagnosis report.
Do we want to put tennis courts in floodways? I mean, I understand you're trying to make it consistent, but that just seems like a really bad, expensive idea to me to do that. I'm just.
Well, as long as for the permitting process, they provide all the no rise certificate by a professional engineer that they will not rise the flood elevation. Yeah, I don't see any inconvenience as long as they provide all the information that it will not increase the flood elevation.
Seems like it should be a conditional use or something. So we used to have this special use category. Are we removing special uses and going with conditional? Is that what?
Correct. Just because the state statutes use the term conditional use.
Right, and I think that's kind of been something we've recognized for a while. But under the special uses that are the authority are given then, are we giving the authority over to the Board of Zoning?
Sorry, for what?
What? Okay, yeah, so what I see is we move from special use to the conditional use. And then when I look at the charts for the public hearings, it almost looks like we're going over to the Board of Zoning for hearing. I think that's on page, let me see, I'll find the page for you, where I saw that. It's on page 29 of 34, Article 3, also known as page 44 of your council packet. Are you there? So when it talks about the Plan Commission role and responsibilities, the old ordinance used to say Plan Commission powers and duties, and that was removed. So in the powers and duties under the state statute, they actually held the public hearings. Now, all of that section of powers and duties has been removed, and it jumps down to Board of Zoning and Building Appeals roles, powers and duties, and under their powers and duties, which is the thing that was removed from the Plan Commission, it says hearings on the next page, on page 30 at the top, item B. So it looks like all the powers and duties of the Plan Commission were removed and given to the Board of Zoning and Building Appeals, and then they have the hearing section. Or why was the power and duties of the Plan Commission listed under state statutes removed in that area?
Well, yeah, that is specifically for the floodplain districts in Article 3. But the administrative standards, that is in Article 9, that will be discussed by the Plan Commission this month.
Okay.
So basically, I mean, besides the floodplain district, all the duties and responsibilities are still in the working
Okay.
process, and the task force will review that this month.
Okay. So it is correct, what I'm seeing is that under this process for this floodplain standards, we are removing powers and duties. Okay, I think that's pretty clear now. All right. And then under, let's see, page, I think I skipped that one. So under page 40, page 25, Article 3, it's site development plan. And that's almost a little more than halfway down. And that is the little II, location of the ordinary high water mark of any abutting navigable waterways. In the state laws, their list, waterways are listed as defined as streams, ditches, retention, detention bases, marshes, whether they're natural or artificial. And on this section, you're only listing to mark any navigable waterways. So I'm wondering if it should be more inclusive and not just say navigable, but just say waterways in general and refer to the definition of state statutes under the planning part of the statute.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that comment, but I will comment that to the consultant.
Okay, all right, thank you. Let's see. Now I'm going to just jump back a little bit because it just seemed to kind of go with talking about site development plans. Otherwise, I wouldn't be going back to this. So this goes back to one of the first things you said on the council action sheet. So on page 6 of the council action sheet, the backside, when you talked about the last bullet point, streamlined review process, for example, the zoning administrator would have the authority to approve site plans except for projects with more than 100,000 square feet of floor area. The average business building is in the 2000s. I haven't looked it up recently, but it was about 19,000 square feet. When you're getting up to 100,000 square feet, that's a pretty good sized building. I'm not comfortable with having the zoning administrator make those kind of decisions for site plans, because that means something almost as big as the Strauss plan wouldn't even came before the public or the plan commission at all. I mean, there was, one of their phases was 150-some thousand, but they could easily say, oh, we're going to come in. Anybody could say, oh, we're going to come in and we're going to put in a 98,000 square foot building, and then we're going to add on, you know, the extra 50,000 the next time around, and both of them won't get a review.
Right. That item is actually a question for the task force in the next workshop, because remember that Articles 8 and 9, the last two articles, has not been reviewed yet by the task force.
Okay. Okay, because when I see that, and this might be a question for your consultants, when I see this seems to not recognize the creation of a plan commission under 62.235, which requires plan commission recommendation to the council, and it seems to alter that statutory requirement. So I'm wondering if having planning manager oversees such a large jump like that alters the statutory requirement for the plan commission recommendation of the common council.
No, just a comment that one of the early versions of the draft has the authority for the zoning administrator to approve all site plans. But when we had the working sessions with the consultant, was to set that cap of 100,000 square feet.
Right.
To limit the authority of the zoning
From
administrator.
and you're looking at it from a plan, so I'm going to throw this out as, especially because we have 3 people out here looking to be a new alderman. I'm going to throw this out from an alderman point of view. That's very problematic for us and dealing with our constituents on several levels. One of the things that there was a recent one done in my district where a significant impact to a property was determined to be a minor site plan review, and had it come before anyone, or if I'd even been more notified ahead of time, I could have let some little history on the fact that that was the second whack on that woodland to remove the features on that, because the first one came through with putting in the road, and the rest of it was supposed to be set aside in conservation. And so the third one, now, so we've had 2 on that already. The third one is kind of already the ball's in motion when we're talking about moving the creek. So that poor piece of property has natural resources that have been hit 3 times, which has never been the intent of the ordinance. And so I'm not happy with site plan reviews not having council or alderman acknowledge and just having it done by the staff.
Just side note that we're talking about site plan that are permitted use, no variance, no impact to natural resources, because I mean that will require additional applications that they have to go to different boards and commissions.
Okay.
So said differently, what you're concerned about is being covered under the normal course of business as reviewed by boards and commissions, and there's public notice to it. It's the routine stuff that goes through the staff. So I do want to make a comment that these are all good questions and good points that should be addressed in the
almost done.
document. But the point is that this has been gone through twice each section by the Plan Commission in an opportunity to take input such as this. So encourage potential new aldermen, take advantage of the workshops that are done through the committee, and it minimizes time in front of the council. Alderwoman, you still have the floor.
Yeah, the first meeting that took place, Keith sent me a message, hey, can you meet? I said, yes. I thought I had 45 minutes I could put into my schedule, only to find out when the time came, well, hey, that's a joint meeting that's going to be a couple hours, so I couldn't do it. And then I'm often not available on Thursdays, so it's really difficult for me. And committee of the whole is a good place to have this and have the items discussed. So I'm really appreciative of being able to have this opportunity as a council member. So then one of the things that has always kind of gotten me in the plan review process is the consistency with refuge for multifamily. Do we have single dumpsters or single garbage cans or single dumpsters? If we could find a little more consistency with that and maybe talk with John's Disposal on how they could help us with more consistency, because we end up with some people paying for services that they don't get. Because if you have a dumpster, you're not getting a cart. And if you have a landscape company, you're not getting brush pickup. And so they end up paying for the same service twice. And my point on that was, nobody should say, well, I don't have kids in school, so I don't pay for schools. Everybody benefits that. But then the school system comes back and say, yeah, you paid for school, but now we're going to send you a separate bill. That's actually what's happening with some condos where they pay that garbage fee bill outside of their taxes, and then they also pay through their association to do everything that everybody in that city gets as part of that fee.
You're
So-
getting a little astray, Alderman.
Oh.
And in addition to that, just to be clear, we haven't approved a development that would qualify for a multifamily development, to the best of my knowledge, that hasn't been required to use their own refuse service of whatever they're making, and they're not getting service. Your issue is an appropriate issue, which we're getting to the bottom of, but it doesn't have any bearing on new development. So,
Well, I
Mr.
wanted
Martin.
to let you know how you see it when they get laid out, and do you do corrals or not, so, or driveways or whatever. It's just important planning thing that you probably don't think of when you're reviewing things. So, I just got just a couple more, page 44, maybe that's the one. Oh, that's the one I think we already talked about, the Plan Commission's role and the powers. I'm good with that one. And I think I've covered the site plan by the zoning administrator. I'd like to see if there's clear criteria on what's going to determine what would be a minor amendment that the zoning administrator gets to approve versus it doesn't come through. And then the section that hasn't come up yet, which we can talk about when we get to the land clearing section, that's an upcoming conversation. But it's my understanding that that section will eventually come out and be put in the municipal code. And there's a lot of good land clearing wording in that. So I'm not sure how we're actually going to do that, but we're going to be talking about that next. Same thing with the municipal code that uses for industrial municipal water fees. The current UDO or the current municipal code bases those on SIC codes. So if we get rid of the SIC codes, and we're looking at tonight water assessment fees and basing those fees, we're going to have to amend the municipal code for that. You look like you're a little puzzled, but we'll talk about that when we get to the water issue. But that's a result of removing all the SIC codes. Because you're taking out the SIC codes, right? You're mostly just going to, right. And so the municipal code bases water fees for those categories on the SIC codes that are in the UDO. And if you remove them, you're going to have to find a replacement in the municipal code for how you're going to bill municipal industrial water fees. Okay, thanks. All right, I'm done.
Alderman Holford.
As I read through this, there's certainly a lot of things to unpack. Understand the process, understand where we're going, trying to make it simplified and easier and condensed. All for that. I guess I'm just looking at some of these things, the changes that are going to occur, and the thought is, how are we going to communicate changes to existing citizens? Like, for example, you're removing the density standards. And I looked at the map, and it all makes sense of what you're doing, but it wasn't that long ago this room was filled with people saying, we don't like this development, the lots are too close together, it's unsafe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So on the one hand, the goal is good, but I'm looking down the road at how we communicate this with the public, because I know that typically you can hold all kinds of hearings and workshops and whatever you want, but typically there's not a great representation from the community. And I can see down the road a lot of questions and a lot of people going, when and how did this happen? I will say specifically that I would think it would certainly be fair and appropriate to have some kind of, I don't want to say just sound, but when there's amplified equipment or any kind of future development, that there should be some type of standard. You've got the municipal code, but I don't see that specifying any standards of what we expect of how that equipment will be aimed and monitored and all of those kind of things, unless I'm missing that in the code. I think that would be important to have in here. I'm not trying to, I don't want to micromanage any of this. These are just a couple general thoughts. Jumping ahead to our page 135, Article 9, questions for the task force discussion. Should the final decision to approve conditional uses be with the Common Council or the Plan Commission? I would certainly hope that you would get input from the Common Council before anybody makes a recommendation on that, as the Common Council are the only ones that are elected by the people and not just an appointed position.
Alderman, that question is coming from the consultant, not the Plan Commission. I assure you that the Plan Commission is going to immediately change that to having special uses done by the council.
Thank you, that's
Yeah,
it.
That came from them, not us. Alderman Hanneman.
Thank you, Mayor. And I will concur with Alderwoman Wilhelm and Alderman Holpfer. In thinking further on this, since we went through this in the task force, I would recommend that maybe, and I'm looking at page 107 and 108 of our council packet here, that maybe 15-5-12 would become outdoor sound amplification systems. And I would look to our consultants to probably come up with some, at least, foundation of preferred wording for something like that, because I do think, and maybe we're just learning from experience, that we should be maybe approving major sound systems that are going up with any sort of development within the community in the future.
So the outdoor place of assembly are listed as a conditional use. And the ordinance may provide some guidelines for the conditional uses that will apply when the Plan Commission and the Common Council are reviewing the special use permit.
Should we have standards within the UDO that we would be requiring an applicant to abide with for the terms of a special use permit or a conditional use permit for an outdoor amplification system? Saying types of systems that could or could not be used, specifying what type of monitoring systems would have to be used, what level of amplification can or can't be used. I guess I'm looking at something more particular than just decibels at the boundary line for an outdoor amplification system.
I see. I can ask the consultants if they have previous experience of cases of specifying standards for conditional uses.
Yeah,
for
I think we should
outdoor
explore
assembly
it.
places. Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, a reminder. Thursday night is another workshop on sections 8 and 9. Some of what Alderman Wilhelm brought up are in administrative standards and procedures. They're important to us as the legislative body. What?
No, just one question for you.
Oh,
Before you're done.
okay. After I do my little thing? Or right now?
No, do you have a preference for the next status update? A date to provide a next update to the committee of the whole or the council?
Well, 3 people up here, maybe 4, aren't going to be here in 2 months, less than 2 months. It's going to take time for the consultant to go through what we're going to talk about Thursday. So it really is dependent on what's the consultant's turnaround time. Then the issue becomes is who's going to make decisions and comments? The people who are leaving office or the people that are coming in? So it's that time of year. This is one of those issues. So let's see what the consultant has to say, and then we can make a decision from there.
Okay.
So back to what I was going to say. It's important for the candidates to know as well that as best as they can, the common council members participate in this discussion. I was involved in the last time round. Alderman Wilhelm was involved the last time around for this. Generally, the Plan Commission meetings had lots of people attending. Nobody attends these workshops. It's part of the responsibility of us as leaders to do that and have our input with the consultants who wrote the document. So that's the lecture for today. Ms. X.
I just wanted to clarify, so this Thursday, the 9th, there'll be the introduction of the draft chapters 8 and 9, but it won't be a full workshop. That's the next Plan Commission meeting. So at that time, regular, I think you'll just be taking questions.
Correct. Just taking correction this Thursday and the following Plan Commission meeting, the consultant will provide a presentation.
Same, but it's not paragraph by paragraph, but certainly as elected officials, we're reading the documents. We read what they say, and issues do jump off the page, and we can talk about them Thursday night. So, okay. All right. Nothing else on this? We'll move on to item D, which is suggestion from engineering to repeal 165 and recreate 129 regarding filling and grading. Oh, and to the candidates, I hope you get these, this UDO document. If you don't, grab Regulo or Marion on the way out. It's boring, it's technical, but it's what we do. And it's important that you know it. So if you want one, there you go. Okay, Glenn.
Good evening. I think most of you know Tyler Beinlich, Assistant City Engineer, and one of the things that Tyler does in our department, he works with developers through the mundane process of all the details of plan reviews, stormwater reviews, erosion control, and that sort of thing. So that's really Tyler's specialty. So I've invited Tyler here and asked him to will explain this, and for the most part, it's his handiwork that he's talking here tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Tyler. Hit the button.
So, yes, there's two driving factors that are sort of prompting, I guess, the idea or the changes that we're bringing today. So, goal number one, and probably the primary one, is that right now, when it comes to managing construction sites and erosion control, there's three different areas of the municipal code or UDO that address that. So there's Municipal Code 129, 165, and then there's the UDO. So if you look at all three of those, they're each a little bit different. And as someone who's got less than 2 years with the city and our technician who handles the permits with all these developers, he started a few weeks after me. It took us as internal city staff quite a while to get our heads wrapped around what all the requirements would need to be and what permits to use. And if you look at, for instance, Chapter 129, there's a filling permit that's referenced. It's a little bit different than the permit that's referenced in the UDO, and it's different than the permit that's referenced in Chapter 165. So really the goal, the primary goal of this is to put them all together, at least Chapters 129 and 165, and make them work with the UDO in unison. And the UDO currently references a construction site erosion control permit, which is really what our current permit, the filled soils disturbing permit, is based off of. That's where we get our class requirements, permit fee, et cetera. But there's a lot of other things that reference other types of filling and grading in 129 that really just don't get addressed by our permit or the UDO, and it just would be better suited to update 129 to work with the UDO. And by doing that, 165, the land disturbances chapter of the code really is kind of rendered ineffective, and it really doesn't serve any purpose. It's not referenced anywhere else in the municipal code. And by expanding the definitions and some of the other stuff in 129, that will cover that. And from an administrative perspective, from both city staff and applicants or developers, it just makes the process a lot easier. I still get calls all the time from contractors or from someone looking to build or a developer, hey, where's your erosion control permit, or where is this and that? And we don't have anywhere in our code or in our website that specifically references that. It is in the UDO, but it just, you got three different things pointing people in a little bit of different direction and trying to get those all uniform. And then one of the other driving goals, and probably if we had two goals for this, is we use consultants for construction site inspection for public infrastructure and for erosion control. There's currently not anything in our code or UDO that lets the developer know that, hey, these costs are your responsibility as the applicant. And we do our best as during meetings and review comment letters to the consultants that they're working with to try and let them know that they're responsible for those costs. But it would be better for us to administer and apply those procedures if it was listed both on the permit and in the code. So those are really the two driving things. I know the question came up from Alderwoman Wilhelm, how this will factor into the UDO rewrite. So we'll be meeting with the consultants for the planning department for that rewrite to make sure that what's referenced in the UDO for construction site erosion control and land disturbances gets carried forward either as part of the UDO rewrite or in some fashion. We just can't let that go to waste. So that's really what 129, the updates will be based off of the UDO, and we want to keep that. But there's also, by updating 129, it gives us a little bit more ability to monitor and enforce issues as they arise. And then included in the packet, and apologies, I gave you guys the revised ones today because there were a few missed spots, but we have some of our existing, we have our existing permit on page 238 of the packet. And right before that, starting on page 234, is our proposed permit. So it gives a little bit more information for us for who's applying. Gives us a little bit of better idea if there's natural resources on the site, and we can kind of take a look at check boxes for that. And then it gives the applicant and the property owner the ability to at least map out what their costs for inspection might be throughout the construction process. And we would update that, regularly as our rates for our consultants get revised every 2 years. But it's a little bit more comprehensive and easier for us to administer than the current permit. And then also included, let's see, that starts on page 242. Just kind of an overview of land disturbance permits and erosion control inspection for what we do and comparing it to some other municipalities too. So our current permit, there's 3 classes. They're kind of broken down on that second page there. So 1/4 acre to a 1/2 acre of disturbance, and then there's also a cubic yard of filler excavation that goes along with that. Then there's a second class and a third class. So when we took a look at other municipalities, across all the ones that we took a look at for their permits, we're the only ones that have any cubic yardage calculation. And from a construction side of things, that's a very difficult number to try and pin down in the beginning of a site. So for everybody's ease of calculating fees and determining what type of class of permit an application would fall into, we were proposing to just use an acreage or an area of disturbance calculation rather than factor in cubic yards. And if you look at the bottom of that second page, which would be 243. Yeah. So it's a couple of, or well, more than a couple, of recent sites that we permitted for construction sites. So those are all based off of cubic yardage. So you can see across the sites the varying permit fees. A site like Cape Crossing, they had their calculations for cubic yardage of fill and excavation was massive. And you compare that size of that site acreage-wise to some of the other sites, and it's really not all that different, but the permit fee is a lot greater. And there's no way for us as staff to check what their cubic yardage is. There's mistakes in calculations for cubic yardage all the time. It's a really hard thing to pin down. So I think a more uniform and just easy way for everybody to administer, both from our side and for applicants, is to do a area of disturbance rather than factor in cubic yards. And then the following page is a table. It kind of shows some nearby municipalities and what they do for permits and their fees, what they do for inspection, primarily in erosion control inspection, and then some information on stormwater permits. So we're relative to some of these municipalities, we're a fair comparison. Some are already built out, so it's, their administration of construction site erosion control is quite a bit different than ours. But just going off of permit fees, I would say for base fees, we're pretty in line with everybody else. But then when you get to the additional fees for larger sites, we really are quite a bit, I guess, more extreme than a lot of municipalities. So they all do acreage calculations or square footage. Whereas when we throw into our calculations the cubic yards, it can make those permit fees get really costly on top of the inspection fees that get charged back to the developers. So with the permit fees, we're also proposing a maximum permit fee. What we're proposing is $3,000. When you look at the other municipalities, some of them have maximum of $2,000, $2,450, $2,250. So we're more than that, but for a 15-acre site, if you use the $5 per extra 1,000 square feet on top of the base 2 acres, that essentially puts you at about a $3,000 permit fee. So our city staff time spent on a 30-acre site versus a 40-acre site versus a 50-acre site isn't all that much more extreme or intensive. So you look back at some of the permit calculation costs, that the 8,200 versus a site that's a similar size only having to pay 2,000. I guess we're trying to make things a little bit more fair for everybody calculation wise. And then looking at inspection, so a lot of other municipalities do what we do, and they'll use consulting firms or city staff, and their time spent to do those inspections will get billed back to the developer. There really isn't a uniform method for doing that. Some municipalities, they have it in their municipal code or ordinances. Some will do a development agreement for every single development, regardless of if there's public infrastructure or not. Others, it's similar to ours, where our process is that we work with the developers ahead of time to try and let them know, and we will send them invoices with our administrative fee on top. And then, other things that some municipalities that they may take on the inspection internally using city staff, some of those already have a stormwater user fee or a stormwater utility that can account for some of those costs, whereas we don't. And then in general, for and this isn't in the municipal code, but it is referenced on our proposed permit application, is minimum inspection frequency. So the city's permit with the DNR, the municipal separate storm sewer system, the MS4 permit, we're required to inspect permitted construction sites, basically for DNR permit, an acre or larger at minimum monthly. Obviously, if we get a complaint or if there are regular issues, we have to follow up within a week or within 48 hours of a complaint. Historically, prior to this year, prior to 2022, we were doing weekly inspections, and then every rainfall event. We've tapered those back some because the inspection costs, and you can see it on 245. The hourly rates, I mean, they can add up for a inspector that's out there 2 to 2.5 hours a week for a full construction season. That can get pretty costly. And if it's not required, I guess, by DNR, it's not necessarily always needed on these sites, especially sites where the contractors are staying on top of any erosion issues. So our general recommendation would be to repeal and recreate Chapter 129 to really make it in line with the UDO, expand the definitions, make it more easy and accessible for contractors, applicants to know that the construction site erosion control permit is the one that they should be pulling. That's the guidance they should be looking for. With that, it makes 165 really just doesn't have any use for that anymore. And then to just revise those permit application classes, the 1, 2, and 3, to base off of area of disturbance rather than cubic yardage, and then have the maximum permit fee.
Well, Tyler, you took a call for me today, and I had the kind of a 3-part question about Section M versus Muni Code versus penalty versus judge citations. And it looks like you amended M, that section, with the new draft?
Yeah, so, yep, thank you for bringing that up. So the existing Section M, and I don't know that I have the existing one here with me.
It's on page 190 in the council packet.
Okay, it references a public hearing for, yeah, thank you. So it references a public hearing for any person failing to complete or correct their land disturbing construction activities. Well, previously it was filling activities, in accordance with the terms of their permit and the chapter. And it basically goes on to say that the council will hold a hearing on the city engineer's recommendation that the city complete the work to get rid of any issues, and then a special, I don't know if it's special assessment, or basically that the permittee would be levied a special charge. If you look in the UDO, that's already, I didn't put the UDO in the council packet. I do have it printed out here, but there is a section that references a similar method to that.
I think it's 15-8.0613, where it talks about judge citations, or maybe that's the general provisions of the municipal code. So basically, there were kind of like 3 different ones, because you were trying to combine all of these. Which one did you decide to go with? The provisions in the municipal code for judge and citation, or the one before the council, or?
So it would, yeah, so I guess the violations and penalties would be referenced to Chapter 1, Section 19 for the.
Okay.
And, yeah, I don't know, I don't have that section of the UDO, I don't think, where it has the hearing, but there is another method in the UDO that's somewhat similar, but, yeah, that Section M should not, or Chapter M should not have been in, sorry, paragraph M should not have been in there. So that was a good catch on your part, because it did add some confusion.
Okay. And the other one that I had was about what happens when this section gets sort of eliminated from the new UDO rewrite. And we kind of heard a little bit about that you would make sure that those got amended. You'd probably have to come back with this and change the numberings and all that, and I'm sure you're aware of that, but I think
Yep.
you want to get a process going, and I think this is a good way to get started and make those cleanups as the UDO comes forward, 'cause who knows when
Yeah.
that's going to happen.
Yeah, so as the UDO gets finished with the rewrite process, we would expect that, anything that gets recreated in Chapter 129, any reference to the UDO to 15-8, we would update to the new article and section number within the new UDO, so.
I didn't see what you ended up with the, you have land disturbing construction, but then there was the land clearing. Did the land clearing section still stay in there under what the UDO had?
I'm not sure, do you know where in the UDO the land clearing exactly was?
I have on here 15-11 under development, clearing of land as part of construction includes clearing and removal of vegetation.
Okay. So within the expanded definitions of 129 and then within the UDO, it includes, for land disturbing construction activity, it includes removing vegetative cover, clearing and grubbing, excavating, filling, grading, demolition, excavating, pit trench, dewatering.
Okay.
And then it excludes things like agricultural land uses, smaller gardens and smaller landscape
Thanks. So
modifications.
this looks a whole lot better than last time it came before us.
Sure.
So I'm really glad we got to go over it. Thanks so much.
Alderman Nelson.
Thank you. First and foremost, this is kind of, in my personal opinion, is what we need more of. Cleaning things up, making things more user-friendly, making things more streamlined, stop the constant encumbrances, stop the difficulty in your jobs as well as the people that want to come here and develop. So I hope that this is a start of a good trend and we continue. Thank you.
Okay, my nickel's worth on this. I'd like to hold this over. I'd like to ask the council to hold this over for two things, two purposes. One is that we get a clean document. We got too many changes here. A clean document. Second one is I'd like to see an addition of maximum fees and a clearer definition of fees charged and frequency. There's some of that in here, but the issue we've been going through for the last several months should be the guide on how to fix this all. And this is great. Don't misunderstand what I'm telling you as a negative. This is to help it get better. And I firmly believe the Common Council is not the judiciary. It's got to go to the municipal court, not the Common Council. My personal view. And with that, that's the extent of my comments, Mr. City Attorney.
And with regard to presentations, hearings before the Common Council, 129-4 subsection K still has an appeal to the Common Council when a permittee fails to obey a stop order or revocation order.
All of that's got to go to circuit court or municipal court. You make circuit court if you want, but we don't have time for that.
Well, if it goes to municipal court, then it's basically citation and fine versus some appeal process. If you want an appeal, perhaps the thought is Board of Public Works or Board of Appeals.
Okay,
So-
this is
so if-
tomorrow night's action. Ed, you want to?
So if I could get clarification, so you're saying that maybe we might have an appeal process, Board of Public Works, but then it would go to citation, or we'd issue a citation?
You can do the citation, but that's an appeal on a stop work order.
Okay. All right.
So if you're allowing for that appeal, akin to a variance decision, off the top of my head, Board of Appeals.
I'm good with either. Ed, Alderman Hofer.
By the way, I do like it. So when you get a permit, is this going to generate a check on behalf of engineering to make sure that they're dumping where they're supposed to fill and not encroaching on wetlands or any of the things that have happened in the past?
Yeah. So I guess it kind of depends on the size of the site. If the site is greater than 1 acre of land disturbance and it has a stormwater management plan, generally those will all be inspected by one of our consultants on a monthly basis. And then usually, I mean, I try to get out to every site weekly at least to drive past and get out if I can. And we'll have other staff, Kyle Baker, our technician who handles the permits, will go out and check for compliance too.
And then at that time, does anybody also check for the content of what's going in to make sure there's no hazardous materials going in?
To the best of our ability, yeah. It's sometimes that's all we can visually inspect is what they're dumping out. But in general, yeah, I mean, we ask for where their source of fill is, and
But they're not signing anything that says we're not. I'm looking for some way to make them liable because we've had this happen in the past, and we're looking at a situation right now where they find stuff in the fill.
yeah, and there is in the proposed version of 129, there is some language on hazardous materials and combustible materials and things like that those are prohibited to be dumped. So it's something we could certainly look at, putting more of a in-depth acknowledgement or getting more information from contractors or developers where they're getting their materials from.
For what it's worth, and that would be up to the city attorney, but it'd be nice to, if you found something, have somebody that you could say, well, you signed that you weren't going to put that material in there. It's your liability to make it right. The other thing is I noticed that you looked at other communities that charge that up front and have it on like a retainer, and opted not to do that. So we bill these contractors or developers on a monthly basis?
Generally, it's a monthly basis, yeah. So as they accrue. So I spoke with 4 different developers, 2 who do subdivisions, 2 who do more commercial industrial. And I brought up because Greenfield is one of the municipalities I spoke to. They do an escrow deposit up front for those inspection costs. And almost immediately when I brought up that, they all said no right away. They said they don't want that. I think the reason is because it takes a big chunk of money from them up front, and then for larger projects, it generally has to get replenished 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And it's easier for them if they can just review the invoices monthly. They'll come back to me or Glenn sometimes with questions, say, hey, what are these charges? Then we can work with our consultants to make sure that they're appropriate and revise the invoices. It makes, I guess, their review of it a little bit easier rather than us just pulling from a pool of money and saying, hey, this is what it is.
And I don't know if you can answer this, but then do we know the turnaround time on payment? Is that coming on a regular basis?
I don't know offhand. I would have to check with staff to see.
So when any invoice goes out, there is if you pay by a certain date, it's this amount. If you don't pay by this amount, I think it's 5%. They get added onto it. So the finance department sends those bills out and they add the charges.
Just want to make sure we're not chasing people with our money, that we're paying our bills on time and waiting for them to reimburse us.
Yeah.
And the other thing is escrowing takes a lot of accounting time. We don't have those people. So, and we don't have the software.
And I did want to add, per a comment just a little bit ago, that we do respond to complaints too. So we do get a lot of phone calls or through the complaint systems, so-and-so is not doing something right, and we will immediately send staff out to go look at whatever the issue is.
Okay, this will be an action item for tomorrow night. I'll hope that you table it for 2 weeks, get a clean document, get some additional information in the document. So we'll move on to item E, which is an ordinance to amend 20721, regarding special assessments of water main laterals. This is a layover from a prior council meeting. Mr. City Engineer.
Okay. Correct. This was discussed in October at the Common Council meeting, and there was just a lot of questions, and it was a packed agenda night, so I fully appreciate you didn't get time to fully read it. One of the comments was maybe we should water it down or consolidate some. After reviewing it, I guess I would like to bring it back to you the way it was, and I guess maybe I should do a better job trying to explain exactly what's in this document. This is concerning the issues when we install a water main again, that in the past, we did not like for people to install a copper service, because if it's in the ground not being used, it can tend to deteriorate over time, and that's just not something we want to have a bunch of those hanging out there. Today, with modern materials, we'll call it plastic pipes kinds of things, they don't deteriorate over time, and so they can stay in there indefinitely. And so if you should happen to wait 50 years to connect to it, it's still going to function just like you started using it today. So I think we can probably revisit that policy on what we allow for. So there's really two options, option one and option two. So option one is basically we just leave everything status quo. So right now when we do a water main project, we ask for the people right then to give us a commitment. Do they want a water service? And if they do, then we install it and we assess them for it, or I should say they pay for it and be assessed. If not, then we wait, and then later when they usually sell the house or their pump goes bad or something like that, then they're digging up the road we have road patches. So as you know, we're very concerned about our road budgets every year. And it's really a shame when we do a nice road project in just a matter of a few years, sometimes not even that long, someone's out there digging in it, and we just like to avoid that as much as we can. So option two is that we install it. And then there's three parts to option two. So option 2A, which would mean that we install the water service and we assess them for it just like we would for the water main. So when we go past your house, we assess you for the water main. We would just include this into the cost and assess it just like we do for the water main. So it's really no additional work on the finance department. It's just another number that we add to it. So again, if you're not familiar with the assessment process, you can delay it for 10 years if you don't connect, and then you have 12 years to pay regardless of when you connect or after 10 years. So in essence, if someone did not want to connect, they really have 22 years to pay for the cost of that, or when the property is sold. And then when the property is sold, that assessment comes due. That's option A. Option B is we would special assess, but it would basically last forever. So if indeed there is a property that non-divisible property that never wants to connect, and people who buy that property in the future never want to connect, it would be the fact that there would be a piece of pipe in the ground that no one would ever recoup the cost for. So that's basically what I call the infinity option. And then 2C, I call the infinity or until sold. So if you have a property and you don't want water, that's fine. But in the future, when someone does sell the property, and generally that goes into I get a lot of phone calls every month, is there water available? And if not, and then they're not interested in the property anymore. And regardless, it affects the sale of the property. So, but when the property is sold, that's a time when, if I'm buying a home from you, we negotiate that in the price, and that happens. So that's A, B, and C. So A, we would assess just like we do everything else with the water project, which also means that if a private developer, say like Bear did on Loomis, or even the TID did on West Ryan, we would require those to be installed, and the residents would not have to pay for those at that time, because they don't pay for the assessment of the water system itself. They wouldn't have to pay for the water service, but that would mean the developer would have to pay for that and recoup that later if that's within 10 years. So again, A is we would assess as we do everything else. B, we would assess, but you have forever, in essence, the infinity. And 2C, you have forever unless the property gets sold, and that's when it would come due, or they decide to connect. Again, the Board of Water Commissioners discussed this, and they added some ideas that we would average the cost. We did some figuring on 3 projects that we've bid out recently, so the Lovers Lane projects, the Ryan Road project, and the Minnesota project. For a short side service and long side service, it's typically different prices from the contractors. So for example, Lovers Lane, $1,500 was a quote for the same side. If they had to cross underneath Lovers Lane, it would cost $8,500. So the water commissioners would like us just to average those. So it doesn't matter if it's on your side or the other side. Maybe it's not fair. If I'm on the other side, why do I have to pay more kind of thing? So it would average to about $6,000 per service is what this amounts to. When we discussed this in October, there was a discussion on non-divisible lots. Should we be adding non-divisible lots? I would suggest to you that, or I would tell you that non-divisible lots is already in the code. That's already a definition. There's other reasons as to why I have to figure out if something's non-divisible or not. So that's really nothing new here. There was also a conversation about adding a 16% increase for administrative, engineering, and inspection fees. Again, that is nothing we're adding. That is already in the code. So that covers, the cost of the service is specifically for what the contractor is charging us, but then someone has to oversee it, someone has to administer it. We have finance efforts, and a lot of City Hall effort goes into that. So that's 16% was already there. We do that currently. That's just nothing new that we're adding. If we were to take it out, that would make actually somewhat more complicated because we'd have to know that these numbers get to 16% and this number doesn't. So that's good. That's pretty much a summary. Hopefully I explained it better this time. If there's any questions, we can have a conversation.
Well, I think what I heard you say is pretty much the wording that you put in there in bold is wording that's elsewhere that you just put in here, so it doesn't really make a big change to that language of.
Correct. So if you look on page 249, the suggested language, the bold and underlined is what we're changing.
Yeah, I guess I kind of like to see a comparison chart of those lots and then some cost figures. I mean, especially if I was one of the properties that was being assessed, but I did note where you made that the water laterals beneath South Lovers Lane and within the Department of Transportation right-of-way are significantly more expensive than the same side ones. And so, okay, so now I was going to get a break.
So yeah, so $1,500 versus $8,500. So there's $7,000 difference if it's on your side or not. And Board of Water Commissioners, and we found out some other communities do this too. They add up all the costs and if it's for 20 homes, they divide it by 20 and that's the average cost and it's an easy
I
calculation.
mean, it makes sense. Everybody pays a little bit more the same rate, but then the people that are like, wow, I wasn't going to pay that much. Now I'm paying more because I'm now paying for someone who lives on the other side of the road. And so that's kind of a toss up on that. But one of the things I had remembered from a long time ago before you were here, Glenn, was the water department seemed to pay more of the cost as an incentive because, one, they saw a benefit to try to get people on water because eventually they make money off of the water. There's fees for that go into the water department. And so that was kind of, okay, we know we're going to pay a little bit more of the share to give them the incentive to get on that. I don't see that we're doing that so much anymore. I know we up the rate and
So that's not how it's intended in the code. The code is that if it costs $100, we're going to assess $100. The idea is that the rest of the system should not pay for you because they had to pay for theirs once upon a time. What was getting off kilter was the fact that the index rate that we were increasing every year was not keeping up with the real cost of goods and services that was being provided. So we were evaluating based on the CPI index, and where you've changed that some years ago to the engineering news record construction cost index. So it's comparing construction dollars every year as opposed to the price of egg. Well, eggs isn't a good example, but eggs and bread and milk and those kinds of things that generally the
Right, I-
CPI.
Well,
I
let
get
let me,
I,
I'm going to get yelled at for this, but we're getting far afield from the agenda item. Let's keep it on the topic of this issue.
the topic of this issue is cost for the residents, so I'm just looking at
So,
different costs.
and the state statutes and Public Service Commission, the
Glenn?
intent is for us to charge what it costs.
Thank you.
Okay, and then in the 207 Municipal Code -20, it says the council may use other reasonable methods of special assessment to assess the cost of the water main installation. Such other methods shall be set forth in the engineer report prior to the adoption of any resolution levying the assessment. So we do have council options, and I think that's sort of what you're bringing here. Is this about as creative as we can get? I mean, some of the people are really not happy about this, and to me, I don't know what everybody's financial situations are. And
Sure.
we've got a pretty large group of people that you could bring together and say, hey, these options? Because I may pick an option and it might not be good for 30 out of the 40 people. I would rather know what their situations are and what is sort of more of a preferred for this larger project, because this involves a pretty large water main that we don't typically do when we're putting this new tower in. A little bit unique situation, especially for Lovett's Lane. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Glenn and Tyler, for this. I'm wondering, and I probably should know this, so forgive me. We don't mention any interest for those who finance over the 12 years. Is there interest on top of that? And if they were to defer for 10 years and then finance over the 12 years thereafter, how do we determine or present to them what interest would be if interest?
So the current city code does not address interest. Past practice has been that you offer 6%. And I'm not aware of any projects that haven't done 6%. So there's 0% interest until the time you connect or the end of 10 years.
So
if
you're
it,
not accruing up until.
you're not accruing. So if it costs $1,000 in 10 years, $1,000 starts at day zero. From that point, you can pay it all in full, so it didn't cost you any interest. Or from there on, it's, again, the Common Council has selected 6%, but it's not in the code.
So that's something we probably should codify, subject to change as interest rates change over the years, because we could get ourselves in a little bit of trouble about that. So maybe, I don't know if this is on the agenda, part of this agenda, but as a part of this topic, maybe Finance Committee would like to take a review of that and make a recommendation to council.
I believe the intent was is 6% generally is higher than normal. So the city would very much encourage people to go find money somewhere else. But if not, then, and so, when interest rates, I'm financing a house for 7.25% right now. So yeah, sometimes it's more than 6.
Yeah. But I just would prefer that going forward, we are clear on that for people, what that might be.
Okay. Alderman Holfer, you got me before I did.
I have one quick question. So regarding the 16%, do the people in administrative engineering and inspection track their time to like a project number so that we can see if that's inaccurate, if it's too high, if it's too low?
We do not keep that accurate of time cards, no.
Thank you.
Okay. I said it before, I'll say it again. I'm not a fan of this. The number that we do not have is how many cuts into existing roadways are done per year where that roadway is 10 years or less, or pick a number, I don't know. Glenn, I appreciate the initiative, but I think this is a solution looking for a problem. And frankly, I'm also concerned about the amount of money it's going to cost us if we do projects let's just take the Highway 100 project. You know, it's going to cost us money to carry the interest on the money we're loaning to a resident that's not going to get covered by the 6% that we charge them after 10 years. This is, you guys do what you want, but this is not quite ready for prime time, and I think it's a solution looking for a problem. Glenn, all due respect.
I understand.
So this will be on for tomorrow night for action. So there we go. Anybody else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Is that Mike?
Nelson and Barber. All those in favor? Any opposed?